Great. Thank you so much and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining me today for the session on common interview mistakes and how to avoid them. My name is Shaifali Aggarwal and I am the founder of Ivy Group. Group does have an E at the end of it, which is a boutique MBA admissions consulting company. I'm really glad to be here today with you on the GMAT Club YouTube channel. Please do hit subscribe to be notified about new GMAT and MBA videos. There is also a special offer as a part of this session. If you subscribe, you will get a 7-day subscription to the GMAT Club, and activation is instant. So look for a link in the comments. And of course, throughout the presentation, I would love it if you can just hit the like button as we go through. Hopefully you will find today's session to be helpful to you. And so before we jump into the common mistakes that I tend to see with candidates and how to avoid them, I'd love to start out with an introduction on Ivy Group and also just provide you with some info on my background. I am a graduate of Harvard Business School, so that I can give you a sense of who I am before we jump into the presentation. So who is Ivy Group? Who are we? Ivy Group is a boutique MBA admissions consulting company that provides personalized and customized services to clients all over the world who are applying to business school. And I want to stress that we are a boutique firm, which means that clients work directly with me and get very personalized attention. One of our core strengths is providing in-depth customer service. And our mission really is to help clients tell their story to business schools so that they can achieve their dreams and impact the world in whatever field that they're in. We are very, very passionate about authenticity, leadership, success, and impact. And because of our approach, our clients have been admitted to the world's top tier business schools, including, and this is just a representative list, but including Harvard Business School, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, Booth, Haas, and London Business School, just to name a few. Now, with respect to my background, I am a graduate of Harvard Business School and Princeton University. I started my career in finance before going down more of an entrepreneurial path, which is why my rich and multifaceted career across industries and functions makes me extremely well suited to understand the varied backgrounds of candidates just like you who are applying to business school. I spent most of my career as a finance professional on Wall Street, where I worked in the investment banking and the asset management industries at leading companies like JP Morgan. And I also have experience working in the educational nonprofit sector and as an entrepreneur, of course, having founded an online media company. However, I've always had a very strong passion for education, and I feel very lucky to have had the opportunities that I did, which led me to launching Ivy Group and to where I am today. And so I've spent many years successfully coaching MBA applicants from all over the world to the MBA programs of their choice. Before starting Ivy Group, I was actually executive vice president of business development and strategy, and I held senior MBA admissions consulting roles at two top consulting companies in the MBA admissions consulting space. And at Harvard Business School, I also had the unique opportunity to gain perspective on what the top business schools are looking for in candidates when I served as VP admissions of the Women's Student Association. And in that role, I collaborated directly with the HBS admissions office as a bridge between current students on campus and prospective and admitted students. I have also been a featured speaker, both domestically and internationally, on the QS World MBA Tour. I've, of course, led webinars on GMAT Club, and I have been quoted as an expert in US News multiple times. I've also been quoted in Business Insider, and I've been a contributor to Forbes, Entrepreneur, The Economist, and The News, and am also a member of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. So hopefully that provides you with some background on who I am. So with that, let's jump into today's topic. So first off, what are schools trying to do when they're interviewing candidates, right? So what is the purpose of an MBA interview? And for round 2, interviews are going on right now. So some of you are probably immersed in that process currently. Some of you are perhaps thinking about business school in the future. And so the MBA interview is, of course, an opportunity for business schools to get to know applicants better. So they want to understand your goals. They want to understand your motivations, your strengths. They want to understand fit. They want to get a sense of how you will contribute to their programs. And ultimately, when business schools are speaking with candidates, in their minds, they're really thinking, you know, is this someone who I would want to go to business school with? Is this someone who I'd want in my class? And so it's really important to do your homework before going into an interview. It's not something that you can sort of do on the fly. It is important to get a sense of and do your research before doing it. And before kind of going into that process, it's important to understand what type of interview you'll be getting. So business schools offer one-on-one interviews with an admissions staff member, a current student, or an alum. There might be a group interview format, or you may even have video essays, as is the case with schools like Kellogg and Yale. So it's really important to know what kind of a format you will be getting with your interview. It's important to understand who's going to be offering or providing that interview or conducting that interview, and also what can you expect in terms of their knowledge of you. And by that, I mean some interviews are blind, which means that interviewers only have your resume to go off of as they are interviewing you. And other interviews are non-blind, which essentially means that the admissions committee has your full application or has read your entire application before they're interviewing you. So it is really important to take some time to understand what the different ways may be that a school may be trying to get to know you. So with that, let's transition into common mistakes that I see when I interview candidates and that I see with my own clients and with applicants. So here is mistake number 1. Not clearly articulating your goals and your story clearly. Now, you're going to business school ultimately to be able to attain your post-MBA goals and also to be able to get something from that program, of course, that will help you get there, right? So when I ask clients this question during mock interviews, I hear a lot of the what and less of the why. So the what are the facts, right? What school you went to for college, what you studied, where you are working, what your post-MBA goals are, etc. The why provides the color and the context. So the why should really focus on the following questions, right? Why did you decide to attain this goal? Why are you interested in pursuing it? What is motivating you to pursue it? And keep in mind that interviewers will be most interested in understanding your motivations and your passions since they already know the facts. So when answering this question, it's critical that you mention both your short-term and your long-term post-MBA goals, right? If you just mention your long-term goals, it's really tough for someone to understand how you will get to that point if they don't know what that interim short-term goal is as a stepping stone, right? You want to make sure to also connect the dots in your story. And that's where the why comes in and not just the what and the how. Really help to convey to your interviewer why what you want to do is critically important for you and how their school fits in. And you want to convey your drive and your motivation. So as an example, when structuring this response, let's just say someone is interested in joining the healthcare practice of an investment bank, right? And the long-term goal is to eventually lead the healthcare practice. So when that's the case, the way you would address this question is by saying, in the short term, I'd like to join the healthcare practice of an investment bank, gain the experience and the hard skills, as well as the soft skills to ultimately lead a healthcare practice of a bank in the future. Then you want to mention, right? So don't stop there. What is motivating you to accomplish that goal? So for instance, perhaps you or a loved one faced health issues and you have a finance background. So your goals are being motivated by combining your strong personal interest in healthcare based on what you experienced in the past with your prior professional experience in finance. And so by answering this question, your interviewer will understand your thought process, your answers will be concise, and your passions, your values, your prior experiences will all be really evident, which is what will make your response really compelling in the eyes of your interviewer. So don't just stop at your goals, help to provide the motivation in terms of what is pursuing or what is, pushing you to attain those goals. So that's mistake number one. So here is mistake number two. Generic answers to the why our school question. So many times when I ask this question to candidates, they respond very, very generically, right? So anything that you say that can be applied to any business school is actually too vague. So just saying things like, well, I'll gain the skills and I'll meet diverse people. Yes, that's true, but it's really important to get very, very specific. And in doing that, part of the process is doing your research and understanding the culture of each school. As you do that, you want to bring in specifics and you want to tie to your goals. And also you want to, it's very helpful to weave in how you see yourself contributing to the school. So what are the different ways that you can research business school programs? Let's go through some of those ways right now. And what I would like to stress is that, in this day and age, there really is no excuse in terms of not having done your research or not being able to weave in specifics, right? So definitely try to do as many of these things as you can as you are researching schools. So one way you can research schools is to go on campus, right? So if you're able to take the time to visit schools in person, I would definitely encourage you to do that. Schools do host information sessions with the admissions office. They offer tours and class visits if they are in session for prospective students on campus. And these do often need to be booked in advance. So the trips should be planned accordingly. I always recommend visiting in the fall or the spring when students are on campus so that you can interact with them and perhaps even attend some activities, such as conferences. But if not, you can still participate in info sessions over the summer. So that's one way, is just on-campus visits. Of course, another is the website. The website is probably one of the first places you should go to do your research. Look at classes. What are the classes that are being taught? How will a particular school's classes and extracurricular activities help you to achieve your post-MBA goals? What is the culture like? So those are all things you should jot down. Another way of learning about schools is through local information sessions. So if you live in a major city, local info sessions are a really great way to meet admissions officers and learn about the schools. You can listen to webinars. Most MBA programs offer webinars. And so there's really no excuse as to why you should not be listening in on those, because all you need is an internet connection. And then, of course, conversations with students and alums. So these can be family members, friends, colleagues, or students that you meet on campus. And often such conversations really provide unique insights into a school that can be mentioned in essays and interviews. So if there is something really unique that you get from a conversation, jot it down along with the person who you spoke to, their class year, because all these things can be woven into your response. So instead of saying, I'm interested in your school because I want to learn about strategy, it's better to say, well, learning about strategy through XYZ class will be really important as I look to attaining my goal in, XYZ space, because I will learn all these different things. So that level of specificity is really, really important, because what you're ultimately doing is tailoring your response to you, right? There will be other people with your background. There will be other people who have your goals. And so by being very specific and bringing in specific classes and clubs and resources, you will be able to show your knowledge of the school and why that school is the absolute best fit for you. Okay, so here is mistake number 3. Not pointing to specific examples in behavioral questions. So what is a behavioral question, right? A behavioral question is meant to assess how you will act in different situations. And so these questions are usually in the form of, tell me about a time when. So it could be, tell me about a time when you led a team, or tell me about a time when you failed. Why do schools use these sorts of questions? Essentially, they are asking you these questions because they are using the past as an indicator of how you will act in the future. So with these questions, many times people are very, very broad. They're not specific. And by being specific, it's really, really critical to point to an actual situation where you demonstrated that sort of a time that they're asking about. So there are a few things to keep in mind here as you think about a behavioral question. First off, prepare a range of examples, right? So the interview is an opportunity to show the admissions committee who you are. And you don't want to be repetitive, right? So you don't want to be providing the same example for every type of behavioral question that may be asked. So this is where it's really, really helpful to prepare a range of examples. And these should be examples that are both professional. So think about your accomplishments or projects that you worked on at work. It could be in your current role, it could be in a prior role, but prepare a range of examples that are professional, and you can also bring in extracurricular examples. So don't forget that, and a lot of people do. When it comes to extracurricular examples, these can be examples from college, they can be post-college examples, but prepare a range of examples. You should just be able to very easily just have examples in your back pocket that you can point to when it comes to behavioral type questions. Now, secondly, use the STAR model, right? So what is the STAR model? It's a very simple model, but it's also a very powerful framework. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the STAR model, the S stands for situation, the T stands for tasks, the A stands for action, and the R stands for results. So when you are using this model, so let's just say the question is, tell me about a time when you led a team. The S would be the situation. So, maybe you were working on a project at work, and this is what you have to accomplish, right? So that's the S and the T. Here's the situation, here are the tasks. The actions are essentially going to be what you did to accomplish that. And it's through the actions that your interviewer will start to understand what your qualities are, right? And so this is where you're going to be showing them who you are, what you did, and they'll get a better sense of how you act in those sort of situations. Then it's important to tell them what was the ultimate result, right? After doing all of that, what ultimately was the impact? What was the result? And so by using this model, you will stay on track, so you won't ramble. It will really help you to focus, make sure you're conveying your point. And, you also want to, through this model, which is also why it's great, let your qualities shine through. So definitely prepare questions that are or examples that would fulfill behavioral type questions. When it comes to interviews, there are a couple of schools that very heavily use behavioral type questions. In particular, Stanford does, MIT does as well. But all of the other schools where the interviews may be a little bit more standard or one-on-one, will usually weave in at least one or two behavioral questions. So it is really important to take the time to prepare those questions. And again, be specific. Don't be broad. Great. So if you're hopefully finding the presentation to be helpful so far, please do hit the like button on the presentation. That would be great. So let's move on to mistake number 4. Not preparing questions for your interviewer. So oftentimes, unfortunately, many times an interviewer will give the applicant an opportunity to ask questions, and the applicant will say, no, I don't have any questions. And that's a huge mistake. Whatever it is, you should definitely be prepared to ask your interviewer questions, because that will show your understanding and it'll show your curiosity of the school. So when it comes to preparing questions to or for your interviewer, it's really important to understand who your interviewer is, okay? Is it an admissions staff member or an alumni interviewer? Now, if it's an alumni interviewer, it's often easier to think of questions to ask them because they ultimately, after all, went to that school, immerse themselves in that program, and know the ins and outs because they've been a student there. So that's usually never an issue. Now, for the admissions staff member who may be interviewing you and who may not have gone to the school, it's really important to ask thoughtful questions. And what do I mean by a thoughtful question? So essentially a question where you can't easily find the answer on the school's website. right? So the interviewer, again, is going to gauge your curiosity about their schools based off of the research that you've done, and in doing so, the fit that you're demonstrating. And if you're asking questions that are really obvious, or questions that, quite frankly, you should know the answer to, you could actually completely tank an interview, even though it's gone well, with a question that is just not very thoughtful. So you want to ask questions and prepare questions where the answer may not easily be found on the school's website if you are interviewing with an admissions staff member. I recommend preparing 3 to 4 questions to ask beforehand. It is very, very likely that you may not have the opportunity to ask every one of those questions, but it's always good to just be prepared with that number in case you do have that opportunity. Some, people establish really strong rapport with their interviewers, and oftentimes interviewers will just let the interview go on and allow the applicant to ask more questions. So definitely prepare questions beforehand. Now, the other sort of areas I do want to touch upon as well, because they're coming up more and more often, are MBA group interviews and how to approach them. And some MBA programs in particular, Wharton and Michigan Ross, require candidates to participate in a group interview, either in lieu of or in addition to the standard one-on-one interview. And this is a relatively more recent phenomena. The rationale behind evaluating applicants in a group setting actually makes a lot of sense. Being able to analyze problems and work collaboratively on teams is really important, both during business school and in professional settings. And so I often do get asked by clients about best practices when it comes to the MBA group interview. And let's therefore go through some of those best practices. So first off, prepare the question beforehand, right? Preparation is half the battle, and this is especially true for the group interview. So for instance, Wharton provides the group topic in advance. And so you should spend the school's suggested time preparing your response. Believe it or not, I have seen some candidates wing it, where they think they know what they'll speak about, but they haven't actually practiced it out loud or fleshed out the response. So make sure to clearly address all aspects of what the topic is asking for as you prepare. And by doing that, you will be much more comfortable with the group format if you practice doing that. Secondly, be a connector in the group interview. So don't dominate the conversation. So you want to try to come across as a person who is able to connect the dots. So this means not dominating the conversation and also not being the quietest person in the group, right? You kind of want to be maybe the second, the second person who's doing the most talking, right? So you want to be able to acknowledge and listen to group members instead of having the urge to just interject with your thoughts. Try to build on what others say. So for instance, can you help to move the dialogue forward if there is a lull? Can you perhaps take different suggestions from group members and help the team come to a consensus? Can you maybe encourage the quietest person in the group to contribute his or her ideas? Being a connector is a quality that MBA programs like to see in a group interview, and it is indicative of how you will act in the classroom and in extracurricular activities. Now, third, you want to be respectful of others. And while this may seem obvious, it's important not to attack or to shoot down other people's thoughts and ideas. It's also important to think about your body language, right? So think about what you are conveying through your actions. So for instance, things like rolling your eyes or murmuring under your breath may not seem very overt, but remember that group members are being observed at all times. So just keep that in mind. And then finally, think about the group's goals, right? It's important in the group interview not to be stuck to your idea. And while you should thoroughly, of course, prepare your response, as mentioned in the first point, assuming you know the topic and the question in advance, it's also important to keep the objective of the group exercise in mind. And so in any team effort, a favorable outcome is the ultimate goal. And this is true of your group as well. So in other words, put your team ahead of any personal agenda. Great. So again, if you're liking the presentation, please hit the like button. So I also want to go through video essays. This is also becoming more common as part of the business school application process. And essentially, these are short questions that schools ask in order to get to know you better beyond the two-dimensional application. So both Kellogg and Yale, for instance, have introduced the video essay component in recent years. These questions can range from the standard, why are you interested in the MBA? Why would you like to attend our school? To more unconventional questions like your take on a certain topic. Now, in terms of the logistics, school will usually give you a sample question or two, or maybe even more for you to get used to the format. And then you'll be required to actually record the questions. Typically, once you're given a question, you'll be given a set amount of time to think about the question. Usually it's somewhere between 20 to 30 seconds. And then a certain amount of time to actually record the question. So it could be, like 60 to 90 seconds. Okay, so how should you approach the video essay? So first, practice, right? This is true for any type of interview, but it's important to prepare for these types of questions as well. And what makes the video questions more challenging is just the format. Unlike a typical interview where no one is timing your responses, there is a set amount of time with the video essays that you do want to be aware of. So when you're practicing, set a timer so that you can get used to answering the questions within a certain time frame. And also make sure to practice in front of a camera. Since interviewing in front of a computer screen is very different than interviewing with a person. All right, so this brings me to my next tip. Look at the camera and smile. So many candidates have a tendency to look at themselves on the screen when recording the questions, but make sure to look at the camera on your computer. And this can initially feel really awkward, but with practice, you'll know exactly where you need to look so that you're speaking directly at the camera and not at the screen. And there is a huge difference when someone is actually looking at the camera. The candidate feels more personable, it's easier to connect with you. And if you need to stick a note or like a Post-it note next to the camera to remind yourself where to look, then do it. But really, you want to come across, again, as with an in-person interview, you want to come across as a good fit with the school and very personable. And remember to smile, right? It's very easy to be very self-conscious with these questions, but the more comfortable you are, the more likable you'll come across. Okay. My third tip here is to highlight new facets of yourself. Because of the limited time frame with these questions, I often see candidates repeating information from their applications when answering these questions. And if you can emphasize new or different information, that's always great because this is another piece of the entire application. So for instance, if the question asks about why you would like to get an MBA from that school, instead of mentioning the same classes or clubs that are in your essays, try to highlight other classes or clubs and why they will help you attain your goals. Or if the question asks a behavioral question and you feel that an example that you already wrote about in your essays would be the best one to talk about, see if you can provide a new perspective or a new angle. And finally, be aware of your surroundings. So when you are ready to record, make sure to choose a quiet place where you will not be distracted. Make sure that the background is appropriate since the video will capture that, the lighting is good, and that you look, professional. But don't be nervous. I think half, or if not the full sort of, important thing here is to be very familiar with the format before you practice, and that will give you confidence. So in summary, right, we've gone through multiple mistakes. We've gone through the group interview. We've gone through the video essays. Hopefully this has given you a sense of what to focus on as you start to practice. And ultimately, I would say, at the end of the day, also have fun with the interview process. It can be very stressful, but it's also an opportunity for you to just have a conversation with someone else, right? You're marketing yourself. So have fun with that. And I think more of you and your authentic self will really start to come through. So with that, I'd like to just tell you a little bit more about Ivy Groupe before we move into the Q&A. So from day one, I work directly with all my clients, and so this does differ from other MBA admissions consulting firms that pair or match you with a consultant who they think will be the best fit. Those consultants are usually working part-time or maybe less experienced. And so I do want to stress that this is my full-time role. And so my clients always come first and get very, full and dedicated attention. We also have an advisory board comprised of professionals who have attended the top business schools and who have a deep understanding of the MBA admissions process. And collectively, my advisory board and I were accepted to or received invitations to the schools listed here, among others. So for instance, HBS, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, etc. We use a very highly customized approach when working with clients. And our process is very collaborative. At our foundation is a focus on authenticity. We don't really use a cookie cutter approach because no two people are alike, and each one of you has very unique and very compelling experiences. And we offer a range of services. So we offer comprehensive packages, hourly services, and a pre-MBA package, really for those who are a few years out from applying and want to bolster their profile. So please feel free to email us at info@ivygroupe.com. There is an E at the end for more information, and if you're interested in exploring further. In addition, we do offer other resources. So we do provide tips, once, twice, three times a month. So feel free to sign up for our emails at www.ivygroupe.com for tips and updates. And when you do that, you'll also receive our free guide on the top 6 mistakes to avoid when applying to business school. You can visit our website to watch other free videos about different topics related to the MBA application process. We also do offer different products. We have an MBA checklist, which is really helpful for those of you who are feeling stuck in terms of where to start. So it's our MBA application checklist, which is a list of questions, and it's almost like a workbook to really help you think through each aspect of the application so that nothing slips through the cracks. We have, a guide on how to craft your resume and an actual Word template of a resume that you can actually populate for business schools, as well as a presentation I've recorded on the 5 secrets to maximizing your chances of getting into your dream business school. And we're also on Twitter, so you can follow us at Ivy_Group. There is an E at the end of group. And with that, I would love to open it up to any questions. Okay, let's see here. Feel free to post any questions. I'm happy to answer it. Okay, so given a choice of on-campus and off-campus interview, which interview format should be preferred? So let me preface this by saying that schools really are indifferent when it comes to the on-campus and off-campus interview. There are some people who unfortunately can't go on campus, and they will never be penalized for being unable to do that. So ultimately, I think, if you are able to, if financially you're able to, you have the resources and you're able to, I do recommend going on campus if you can. because it's a very different experience being on campus, prior to interviewing, right? You can actually visualize yourself there. You're in that mindset. You may be speaking to other students and just getting really excited. So it can be really helpful to be on campus, but it's not a requirement. And ultimately, choose the place where you think you will be most comfortable, because schools are indifferent between the two. Okay, so here's a question. Should I hire a consultant before taking the GMAT? That's a really personal question, right? It's a really personal preference. I have worked with clients who have done it simultaneously or are doing it simultaneously, where they are currently working on their applications now. So we're working on strategy as they're studying for the GMAT. And kind of we're doing it in parallel. Other people prefer to have that score and make sure the score is in the range it needs to be before applying. So it is a very, very personal choice. I would say really it's about 50-50 when I work with clients on both sides of that sort of question, where some have already taken the GMAT and others are in the process of doing it. So it's whatever you feel most comfortable with. Okay. So here's another question. So I have experience in US staffing as a technical recruiter. I feel this work experience is really not unique. Do you still think I have a chance for a great B school if I get a good GMAT score? So it's really, really important to think about your entire story, right? So you do want to get a good GMAT score for sure, especially if you are in an oversubscribed demographic. So oversubscribed demographics would be, Indian male engineers. It would be, males in finance or consulting, women in consulting. So any oversubscribed demographic, the GMAT score will be really important, but it's really important to highlight who you are, right? There are multiple facets that go into the application. It's your professional performance. And, even though you may be a technical recruiter, what have you done in that role, right? What have you done to have impact? What are your accomplishments? What have you done on the extracurricular side? What are your grades in college? So I truly think everyone has a shot. It's just being able to put that entire package together. And so really think about your holistic picture when it comes to the, top B schools. Now, given the competitive nature of business schools, it's still important to have a range of business schools that you're applying to. So definitely give, the top ones a shot, but include, more target schools and safety schools as well to make sure you have a well-rounded approach and strategy to the process. So there's a question here. Any specific tips for interviewing at HBS? So really great question. I actually did conduct another webinar through GMAT Club focusing on how to prep for the HBS interview. So hopefully if you just do a search, you'll find it. You can also find the link directly on my website. If you just click the webinar tab, there is a tab for HBS interview prep. Okay. So can you speak a little bit about blind interviews? Anything to keep in mind or any special prep is required for such an interview? Within the top 15 schools, which schools are famous for conducting blind interviews? So when it comes to the blind interviews, essentially the schools will have your resume. So in that scenario, really is prepping the same way, right? So thinking about the mistakes that I mentioned here, you want to avoid those mistakes. So you want to be able to explain the why in your resume, because your resume is just a two-dimensional piece of paper. And you want to go beyond that, right? So you want to be able to connect the dots in your story. You still want to prep, have specificity when it comes to the schools. It's important to think about, preparing questions for your interviewer, preparing for behavioral questions. So nothing really different or anything special that's required. You still must know your story and know the specifics, understand fit, etc. In terms of who conducts blind interviews, so Columbia conducts blind interviews. So usually it's an alum who just has your resume. Kellogg just has your resume. Stanford with the alums is typically blind. see what else here. Booth, typically they just have your resume. So those are the ones that pop up right now. Haas, I believe, is blind. So most of them I would say are blind, but you can just do a quick Google search and look at your specific school. All right, so what is a preferred business casual outfit for both males and females? So for guys, when it comes to a business casual outfit, I think it's, wearing a suit but without a tie, but so you have a blazer. You always want to look good. I always think it's better to err on the side of overdressing than underdressing. That's just my philosophy. I don't think anyone will ever criticize you for overdressing the part. For women, I think, for business casual, it could be, wearing a dress, or just, wearing just a suit. So that's what I would recommend for business casual. Okay. All right. Do I have any specific advice for Booth's interview? They are blind interviews. Yeah. So for Booth's interview, nothing specific. I think just following the guidance that I've given here will help. But as is true for any school, just keep in mind what each school is looking for. So with Booth, they really value an analytical mindset. They really value, you know, being intellectually curious. They really value leadership. So just take a look at what the school's qualities are, and think of your own strengths and really how to combine the two. So here's a question. Currently, an undergraduate student who has 0 to no work experience. Is it necessary to have proper work experience for 1 to 2 years? So having work experience is incredibly helpful. Schools actually more and more offer what are called deferred MBA programs. So these are really for students who are seniors or last year of college who can apply to business school in their senior year to get a spot at that school 2 to 3 years out. So that's one way you can apply to business school as a senior in college without having work experience. So that's something you can consider. But beyond that, yes, it is really, really important to have work experience when applying to the full-time, kind of regular cycle round. And more I'm sort of seeing that sweet spot at around 2 years used to be okay. It's, still okay for some people, but in general, I would say it's even more towards the 4-year mark is sort of the average for business school. Okay. Trying to see if there are any other questions here that I can answer. So is it possible to get a scholarship with a low GPA between 2.5 and 3 for some business schools? It's tough, mainly because merit scholarships are based off of the strength of an application, and the GPA typically does play into that, as does, the GMAT score or the GRE. But there may be scholarships. So merit scholarships may be tougher, but there may be, specific scholarships that have been, carved out, focusing on a different, specific area. So for instance, if people are interested in social enterprise, oftentimes there's a scholarship for students who have that particular kind of background. So that's what you can take a look at. Great. All right. So someone has a question here about working at a small family business. What are some schools to take a look at? So I would say just, take a look at, the top 15 to 20 schools. You want a range of schools that are sort of stretch target, that are, in kind of maybe more safety mode, although I'm always hesitant to say safety because no school is truly safety. But take a look at what schools, for the family business side, offer, family business classes, which ones offer family business clubs. For instance, I believe Columbia does, and it's becoming definitely more and more prevalent these days. Great. So once again, please do hit the like button if you found this presentation to be helpful. And ultimately, you all have really interesting backgrounds and stories. I truly believe that. And it just comes down to, thinking about what makes you unique. And, please feel free to visit our website to avail of more resources, to sign up for emails. And if you're applying, in the near future, feel free to sign up for or to request a free 20-minute consultation. So with that, thank you so much for your time today, and good luck with everything.